You already know the feeling. Not the tiredness that comes from a long day. Not the kind that a shower fixes. This is something heavier. You get in the car, close the door, and just sit there. Engine off. You don't move. Because moving would require energy you no longer have. And you were only at a dinner. 3 hours. You sat across from people who seemed perfectly fine. Laughed at the right moments. Said the right things. Nobody noticed anything. But somewhere between the appetizer and the check, something got taken from you. Something you can't name. The worst part isn't the exhaustion. It's that you already knew it was going to happen. You knew before you walked in, and you went anyway. So here's the real question. If it costs you this much every single time, why do you keep going back? Not because you enjoy it. You go back because you were taught that the man who opts out is the man with a problem. That solitude is a symptom. That an empty calendar is something to explain. So you keep showing up. You keep performing. You keep handing over something you can't get back. And you call it being social. Let me tell you what's actually happening inside your mind every time you walk into a room full of people you don't particularly want to be around. Not philosophy, not self-help, mechanics. Because once you understand the machine, you can't unsee it. What you're doing in those rooms isn't conversation. It's labor. Every word you choose, you filter first. Every reaction you have, you calculate before letting it show. Every opinion that surfaces, you check against the room before deciding whether it's safe to say out loud. Psychologists call this self-monitoring, continuously regulating your behavior based on social cues. On the surface, it looks like social intelligence. Underneath, it's a full-time job with no days off and no compensation. Sustained self-monitoring depletes executive function, the same part of your brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, focused attention. You're not just tired after a heavy social weekend. You're operating with a fractured instrument. And most men don't recognize that as damage. They recognize it as Tuesday. Arthur Schopenhauer observed something the optimists of his era refused to say out loud. To exist comfortably within society, a person must continuously sacrifice a portion of their individual will. Every interaction carries an implicit tax: conform to the frequency of the group, or face the friction of being out of place. Most people pay without thinking. They don't even notice the withdrawal anymore. He called highly social people easy to get along with. He didn't mean it as a compliment. He meant they had done enough self-erasure that there wasn't much left to cause friction. The smoothness wasn't confidence. It was attrition. Think about the last time someone said something genuinely ignorant in a group. Your mind moved fast. You saw exactly where the logic broke down. But you looked at the room, ran the calculation, and decided the cost of correcting them was higher than the cost of swallowing it. So you nodded. Maybe you smiled. That single act of swallowing the truth required more mental energy than most people spend in an hour of focused work. Multiply that by every dinner, every meeting, every obligatory gathering in the last 6 months. You've been running a deficit you never consented to. And here's the part men resist most. The mask doesn't stay at the door when you get home. The brain is plastic. It shapes itself around repeated patterns. When you spend years reflexively adjusting your personality to match whatever room you're in, that adjustment stops being a choice and starts being a default. The filter becomes the first response. The authentic reaction becomes the one that requires effort to access. You think you're wearing a mask. What's actually happening is the mask is wearing you. Now look 10 years forward. The man who never learns to protect his mental energy doesn't burn out in one dramatic moment. It happens the way a blade loses its edge, so gradually that you keep reaching for it, keep expecting it to cut, and one day you realize it's been dull for years. You just stop noticing, because you stop trying to use it on anything that required sharpness. You wake up, and the ambitions that used to keep you awake at night feel distant. Not abandoned. Just quiet. You tell yourself it's maturity. But that's not what happened. What happened is that you spent so long operating at the frequency of people who were never going anywhere that you started to forget you were supposed to be moving. The ceiling of your environment became the ceiling of your imagination, without you signing anything. The courtiers who surrounded European monarchs for centuries were often brilliant people. Educated, multilingual, capable of sophisticated thought. Within a generation of court life, their entire output reduced to managing egos and making themselves small enough not to threaten the room. Not because they became stupid, Because they practiced smallness until it became fluent. Until it became them. You are doing a slower version of this every time you sit across from people who have decided that depth is exhausting and surface is enough. So what do you actually do? First, treat your attention as a closed resource, not an open one. Right now, your attention operates like a public park. Anyone can walk in, stay as long as they want, and leave without cleaning up. A text comes in, you respond. An invitation arrives, the default is yes until you find a reason to say no. Stop running that system. Your attention is the only thing between you and the life you keep saying you want to build. Every hour it spends servicing someone else's boredom is an hour that didn't go toward anything you'll look back on and recognize as yours. Develop a pause between the stimulus and the response. Someone asks for your time, don't answer immediately. Check the real cost. What does saying yes mean for what you were going to do instead? If the answer doesn't hold up, you decline. Without a fabricated excuse, without apology. The discomfort of that is smaller than you think, and it shrinks every time you practice it. Second, learn the difference between solitude and avoidance. They look identical from the outside and feel completely different from the inside. Solitude is active. You're alone because you chose the silence, because there's something inside it you need, a thought that won't surface in noise, a decision that requires more than a reactive mind. That kind of alone produces things. Avoidance wears the same clothes but runs a different engine. You're gone because the performance became too heavy. That's a holding pattern, not a destination. Schopenhauer wasn't a hermit. He walked the same 2-hour route through Frankfurt every day, engaged ideas voraciously. What he refused was the performance. He kept the substance and cut the theater. That's the line. Not between social and antisocial. Between chosen and obligated. Third, get comfortable being misread. When you stop performing enthusiasm you don't feel, when you let a conversation die instead of feeding it, people will react. Some will get distant. Some will say you've changed. The ones most invested in the performance of you will be the loudest, because your withdrawal removes something they were using. Let them adjust. Your silence doesn't create a vacuum. It creates a filter. The people who stay after you stop performing are the ones engaging with something real. Fewer, quieter, and a single conversation with one of them gives back more than a month of evenings spent managing rooms full of people who never actually saw you. Here's where it lands. You're not exhausted because you're weak. You're exhausted because you've been running a system that was never designed to sustain you. One built on the premise that your value depends on your availability. That the man who protects his interior is the man with something wrong with him. That system has been running so long it started to feel like your personality. It isn't. Every room you walk into is a transaction. Something goes in, something comes out. For most of your life you've been on the wrong side of that exchange, putting in attention, energy, and walking out with less than you arrived with. Not because you were naive, because nobody ever showed you the ledger. Now you have it. The people who've been benefiting from your openness will be the first to pathologize it when you close the door. They'll say you used to be warmer, easier. They'll be right, you were easier. Easier to access, easier to drain, easier to keep small. When you close this video, and the next thing asks for your attention, a notification, a message, an obligation dressed up as an opportunity, just pause. 1 second, and ask yourself whose life you're about to spend the next hour living. If the answer comes easily, you already know what to do. Drop one word in the comments that describes how you feel after most social events. No explanation, just the word. If this landed, hit like, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes somewhere most people aren't ready to look. It's already there when you are. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.